The script sits on the table, untouched for 3 days. Al Pacino paces around his Beverly Hills home at 2 a.m., glancing at the screenplay every few minutes like it might disappear. He'd announced his retirement 6 months ago, told the world he was done, finished, ready to enjoy his golden years. But tonight, staring at this new role offer, his hands shake with withdrawal. Because for Al Pacino, retirement isn't rest, it's death, and he'd rather die working than live in silence. Los Angeles, 2019. After 60 years in the business, Al Pacino holds a press conference that shocks Hollywood. "I'm done," he declares to a room full of stunned journalists. "I've given everything I have to give. It's time to step back and enjoy life." The announcement makes international headlines. The greatest actor of his generation is finally hanging up his craft. What nobody knew was that Al Pacino had no idea who he was supposed to be once the cameras stopped rolling. The retirement lasted exactly 72 hours. On day 3, his assistant found him in his study, surrounded by old scripts, reading Michael Corleone's lines aloud to empty chairs. When she asked what he was doing, he looked up with genuine confusion and said, "I don't know how to just sit here. I don't know what people do when they're not working." But this wasn't about money or fame. This was about something much more terrifying. For most people, retirement means freedom. For Al Pacino, it means confronting the horrifying possibility that without a character to play, there might not be anyone home. His entire identity had become so fused with performance that removing acting from his life was like removing his personality entirely. The first week of retirement was a complete nightmare. Pacino would wake up at his usual 5 a.m. call time, automatically reaching for scripts that weren't there anymore. For the first time in decades, he had no lines to memorize, no character to inhabit, no role to prepare for. The emptiness was suffocating. He'd walk through his house like a lost ghost, picking up objects and putting them down aimlessly, unable to find purpose in anything that wasn't directly related to acting or performance. His daily routine, which had been structured around work for 60 years, completely collapsed. Without rehearsal schedules, filming deadlines, or character preparation, he had no framework for organizing his days. He'd sit in his living room for hours, staring at nothing, waiting for someone to call action, so he'd know what to do next. His longtime friend Robert De Niro visited during week 2, finding Pacino sitting in his living room, staring at the same spot on the wall for hours. El De Niro said with genuine concern, "What are you doing?" Pacino's response was chilling in its honesty. "I'm trying to remember who I am when I'm not being someone else." But here's what made the situation truly desperate. He couldn't remember. Without a role to play, Al Pacino had no framework for basic human existence. How do you wake up when there's no character's morning routine to follow? How do you have conversations when there's no scripted dialogue to guide you? How do you feel emotions when there's no director telling you what the scene requires? How do you even know what to wear when you're not in costume? These weren't philosophical questions for Pacino. They were practical, daily crises that left him paralyzed with indecision. During the 3rd week, his longtime housekeeper found him in the basement at 4 a.m., going through cardboard boxes of old scripts and performing complete monologues from plays he'd done 40 years earlier. He'd set up dining room chairs as an imaginary audience and was delivering full theatrical performances to an empty room. When she interrupted, asking if he needed anything, he seemed genuinely surprised that no one was actually watching his performance. The retirement experiment was failing catastrophically, and everyone around him could see it. His family tried desperately to help by planning activities, golf lessons, cooking classes, European travel, art appreciation courses. But Pacino approached each activity like it was research for a role he was preparing. At the country club, he studied other players' golf swings and mannerisms, as if preparing to play a professional golfer. During cooking classes, he'd ask the instructor detailed questions about the motivation behind different recipes and cooking techniques. On a planned vacation to Italy, he spent the entire trip critiquing hotel staff performances, restaurant service, and tourist guide presentations, suggesting how they could improve their customer service characters. His family realized he was incapable of experiencing life without viewing it through the lens of performance analysis. Everything became about acting, because acting was the only framework he had for engaging with reality. The breaking point came during a seemingly innocent family dinner at his daughter's house. Pacino sat quietly for most of the evening, which alarmed everyone because he'd never been quiet at family gatherings in living memory. When his 7-year-old grandson showed him a school art project, instead of responding naturally as a loving grandfather, Pacino launched into an elaborate, obviously rehearsed performance of interested grandfather that was so artificial and theatrical, it made everyone at the table uncomfortable. He used exaggerated facial expressions, projected his voice as if speaking to an audience, and delivered responses that sounded like lines from a play about grandfathers rather than genuine reactions from an actual grandfather. Later that night, his daughter called him, deeply concerned about what she'd witnessed. "Dad, you seemed like you were performing being our father tonight, instead of just being our father." It was like watching an actor playing the role of Al Pacino at a family dinner. The observation hit him like a physical blow, because he realized she was completely right. He had been performing because he didn't know how to simply exist as himself in any situation. That night, Al Pacino made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would never truly retire, because retirement meant confronting the possibility that Al Pacino, the person, might not actually exist beneath all the characters he'd played. The call came the next morning, as if the universe was testing his resolve. A small independent film, nothing glamorous or high profile, but it was work. His agent was surprised when Pacino accepted immediately without even reading the full script. "I thought you were retired," the agent said. Pacino's response was telling in its desperation. "I was wrong about that. Very wrong." But the pattern had been established, and it would repeat endlessly. Every attempt at stepping back from work triggered the same existential crisis and desperate return to performance. In 2020, he announced he was slowing down and would be more selective about projects, taking only roles that truly inspired him. 3 weeks later, he signed contracts for 2 new films and a Netflix television series. When asked about the contradiction, he claimed the projects had called to him in ways he couldn't ignore. In 2021, he gave extensive interviews about enjoying his later years at a more relaxed pace and spending time on personal interests. That same month, he began intensive rehearsals for a Broadway revival, started developing his own production company, and signed onto a documentary narration project that required months of voice work. The entertainment industry started to notice the pattern. Directors and producers would joke that offering Al Pacino a role was like offering water to someone dying of thirst in the desert. He'd accept projects that were clearly beneath his artistic stature, take on small supporting parts that other actors of his caliber would automatically decline, and agree to work for minimum-scale wages just to keep working. But those close to him understood the deeper truth. He wasn't being greedy, ego-driven, or desperate for attention. He was fighting for his psychological survival, using work as life support. His agent revealed the reality during a private conversation with a close friend. Escalating doesn't just want to work. He physiologically needs to work. When he's not actively preparing for or performing a role, he becomes genuinely depressed, disoriented, and almost catatonic. It's like watching someone slowly disappear in real time. The most heartbreaking example of this dependency came in 2022. Pacino had committed to attending a week-long meditation retreat in Big Sur, thinking that spiritual practice and mindfulness might help him find peace and identity outside of acting. His therapist had suggested it, and his family was hopeful. He lasted 6 hours. The silence, the lack of performance requirements, the instruction to simply exist without character or role. It sent him into a panic attack so severe that retreat staff had to call an ambulance. He was hyperventilating, convinced he was disappearing, unable to catch his breath because he had no script to guide his breathing. The retreat coordinator later said, "I've worked with thousands of people over 20 years, but I've never seen someone so genuinely terrified of simply being with themselves." He kept asking what he was supposed to do during meditation, as if existence itself required a detailed script and direction. Physical aging made the situation even more desperate and psychologically fraught, as his body began showing its 80 years slower movement, less energy, visible aging. Pacino became increasingly frantic about finding and accepting work, not because he needed the money or craved fame, but because each potential role might be his last chance to exist as someone other than a confused old man with no defined identity. He started deliberately seeking out roles that required intense physical demands, as if proving to himself and the world that he was still vital enough to disappear completely into character. Period pieces that required mastering historical accents and mannerisms. Action films that demanded grueling 16-hour shooting schedules. Anything that would consume his entire being and leave no room for the terrifying question, who is Al Pacino when he's not acting? The answer, increasingly, seemed to be nobody at all. His contemporary actors began worrying about him seriously. Robert De Niro, who had successfully transitioned into more selective work balanced with personal time and family life, tried repeatedly to counsel Pacino about finding healthy balance between work and existence. But every conversation revealed the same disturbing thing. Pacino literally didn't understand how to exist without a role to play. "What do you do on days when you're not working?" Pacino asked De Niro during one concerned lunch meeting. When De Niro described simple activities, reading books for pleasure, gardening, spending unscripted time with family without any performance element, Pacino looked genuinely confused and asked, "But what character are you playing during those activities?" The question revealed everything about his psychological prison. His health started suffering significantly from the relentless work schedule he maintained specifically to avoid any form of retirement. Exhaustion, stress-related illnesses, and physical strain from accepting roles that would challenge actors half his age. But every gentle suggestion from doctors or family that he slow down triggered the same response. Immediate panic and desperate searching for the next project to fill the terrifying void. Industry insiders started referring to him privately as the actor who couldn't stop, but they didn't understand it was never a choice or ego decision. Stopping meant confronting the abyss of his own completely undefined existence. The most tragic and revealing moment came during a 2023 magazine interview, when an experienced entertainment journalist asked him about his incredible legacy and what he'd like to be remembered for after his eventual death. Instead of reflecting on his remarkable body of work, his contributions to cinema, or any personal philosophy about life and art, Pacino immediately began discussing his current projects and enthusiastically describing future roles he was considering. When the journalist pressed him specifically about life outside of acting, hobbies, personal relationships, spiritual beliefs, anything not related to performance, Pacino sat in complete silence for nearly a full minute before saying, "I don't have a life outside of acting. Acting is my life. When I'm not acting, I'm just waiting to act again." The brutal honesty was devastating because it revealed the complete fusion of identity and performance that had trapped him for decades. Today, at 84 years old, Al Pacino continues working at a pace that exhausts colleagues half his age, not because he loves acting more than other actors, but because he fears non-acting more than death itself. Retirement conversations are forbidden topics in his household. His schedule is booked years in advance with films, television projects, theater productions, and voice work. Those close to him have stopped suggesting he slow down because they've learned that for Al Pacino, slowing down equals disappearing entirely. He's not working to build a legacy, earn money, or prove anything to anyone. He's working because work is the only way he knows how to exist as a human being. The boy from the Bronx who discovered he could become anyone through acting never learned how to simply be someone. Now at 84, he faces the ultimate performance challenge, playing Al Pacino. But that's the one character he's never learned to portray convincingly. And this is the tragic truth about Al Pacino's inability to retire. It's not that he won't stop working, it's that he can't stop, because stopping means confronting the terrifying possibility that underneath all those brilliant characters, there might not be anyone left. Al Pacino will work until his final breath, not because he loves acting, but because acting is the only way he knows how to breathe. Retirement would be suffocation, and he'd rather die as a character than live as nobody at all.